Okay guys, welcome. I want to go ahead and get started. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Nisha Shanmugaraj, and I'm the Assistant Director of the GCC. So basically, the Global Communications Center offers free one-on-one consulting for all of the papers that you're writing and presentations that you're giving. In addition to just papers, we also help with application materials to jobs and the ever-fun graduate school. So obviously, that's what our workshop today is going to be focusing on. So writing your application essay to grad school. Now, this is a notoriously difficult document to write, and largely because it is so self-involved. When you are writing this statement, it is all about you. But people tend, when they're writing this, to become so focused on themselves that they totally forget about their audience. They totally forget why they're actually writing this. So I want to go over a bunch of examples today and talk to you about 3 major pitfalls that we've seen people make when applying to grad school. So a few notes here. This statement is alternatively referred to as a personal statement or a statement of purpose. At the end of this workshop, I want to go over some of the differences or not differences between those two, but for our purposes today, I'm going to refer to those interchangeably, so we can assume that a personal statement is the same thing as a statement of purpose. Now, something that is different that you want to keep in mind, a research statement. So a research statement is different. If you have questions about that, we don't really have time to cover that in this workshop, but you can come up at the end. I can give you a couple tips about that. So let's see here. Just by show of hands, how many people are applying to a terminal master's program? So just the MA. Okay, wow. So how many people for the PhD? Okay, awesome. So many PhD. Great. Good. So that'll help you kind of tailor what we're talking about today. And again, if you don't have a handout already, and if you haven't signed in, definitely do so. We are recording this workshop. We'll be sending the slides and also a recording to you, but only if you sign in. And the handout's just useful for looking at the examples here. So starting right out, when you apply to grad school, your application materials packet is made up of a number of snapshots, as I like to think about it. So there is a snapshot of your grades. So basically your transcript, how well you've done at school, and also your transcript in terms of, or also your grades in terms of GRE scores. You also have the snapshot in terms of letters of recommendation. So the snapshot of what your advisors and your professors think about you. You also have the snapshot of your CV or your resume. Basically, this is a snapshot, a more exhaustive and comprehensive snapshot of kind of everything you've done. So all of the various activities, jobs, positions you've held, accomplishments, skills, and publications if you do have the curriculum vitae. Lastly, there's of course the snapshot of the statement of purpose. Now, what is tricky and where a lot of people actually go wrong is kind of forgetting that the statement of purpose is its own snapshot. So they tried to take all of the other snapshots and just put it in the statement of purpose, which is kind of a waste of space. So I want to talk specifically about the function of a personal statement. So what is the function? If the function of, let's say, the letters of rec is to see how your advisors like working with you and their assessment of your research potential, what is the snapshot of the personal statement? Why do you write this?
Who you are as a person and as a researcher.
Okay,
like what
cool.
drives you.
Nice. Okay, so what drives you, more of the personal aspect, who you are as a person and as a researcher. I like that part too. Yeah. What else? Why is this required? Yeah.
To highlight your strengths.
Definitely, definitely. Any specific types of strengths or just overall strong things about you?
Overall.
Yeah, definitely. Make you seem like an attractive candidate to this department. Yeah, you want to make it seem like you're an asset to their department. Yeah. Anything else? I've kind of honed down what I think the primary snapshot of this statement is into these questions. What is the
cool, exciting new work you want to do and why? And how are you uniquely equipped to handle this research?
And this, I think, speaks to what you guys were talking about in terms of strengths, in terms of who you are as a person as well. So kind of how are you an asset to our department? So these two questions, I think, are the primary questions that you want to be answering. The committee, especially if you are applying to a PhD program, they want to see that you have a well thought out research agenda that you have actually thought about. That you're not just like, oh, I'll go to grad school, see what happens. I'm sure it'll work out. They also want to see the, you guys are like, okay. Even if you don't actually feel like you have that concrete research agenda, you want to kind of have some idea, and you definitely want to make it seem like you've given this some thought. You also want to show people how are you the perfect person to actually pursue this research. So grad school admissions, totally different ballgame than undergrad admissions. They are very, very selective. Most of the top universities only admit like a very small percentage of applicants. So you want to show that you are uniquely equipped, not just equipped as everyone else, but extra equipped to handle this research.
Lastly then, and this I put in italics because I don't think it's a question that you maybe are going to answer explicitly, but it should kind of be a subtext throughout your statement. Grad school is hard. Grad school is really hard, and it's a long haul. It's a marathon. You are talking anywhere, for the terminal masters might even be short as 1 year, but for other grad school, if you're doing postdocs and stuff, we're talking like a decade of your life in school. They want to know that you are ready for that and you're not going to get in and they're going to waste one of those spots and then you're going to be like, never mind, I don't want to do it anymore. So they do want to know you are committed, you have that passion and that thirst for this research.
So this is actually, before I even give you any actual instructions, I want you guys to just think about this. 2 minutes, brainstorm about these questions. And I left you a little bit of space on your actual handout, so go ahead and write some stuff down. What is the research you want to do in grad school and why? And why are you a specifically good person to pursue this research?
So go ahead and finish up the thought that you're on.
use that to get you guys kind of in the mindset of your own unique framework. I don't think the reason I only give you 2 minutes, we could easily spend the whole, the hour that we have with you guys soul searching about the answer to this question. So I highly encourage you to do that when you go home after this workshop. Continue thinking about this stuff, because I think that's kind of the first step. But I want to move on to some common pitfalls. So the 3 common pitfalls that people tend to make and how we can overcome those pitfalls. For those of you who've been to a GCC workshop in the past, I love examples. I love before and after examples. So that's going to be very similar to this workshop in terms of before and after examples. So the 3 common pitfalls. I want to find out our first pitfall by reading this example.
So go ahead and take a look at example 1A on your handout. It's the same one as up here, just might be easier to read.
So what do you guys think? What are you noticing? And it's okay if it's not in your field. I just want to understand the mood. Yeah.
It's considered restating a lot. That's exactly what I'm saying.
Exactly. This is the most common pitfall, and I already kind of hinted at it, but I really, really want to hammer this one in. This is the most common thing I see in the hundreds of statements of purpose that I see. People really simply just restating their resume, restating their CV without adding anything new. We already talked about how there are these different functions of the different documents. Specifically the CV and the statement of purpose, these are ones that should complement each other. So really what you want to do is pick out the most relevant, the most impressive, the most important and exciting experiences and create a narrative of them. Instead, if you're just taking your statement of purpose to literally restate every single thing that you talk about, that's a waste of space, right? Like you already said that stuff. So repeating it isn't going to add anything to your application packet. So what you want to be thinking about is creating a narrative.
But how do we do that? So I like to think of creating this narrative by, first of all, talking about how the decisions you made. So the reasons you did these things in the first place, the reasons you came across these experiences, but also what did you gain from them? What did you gain? What are the skills, insights, qualifications that you gained from your various experiences? So create more of a narrative about these experiences. And ideally, the insights that you have acquired from your various experiences are transferable, right? So not just the skills, not just the technical skills, but also the understandings and the various insights that you've gained. Those can be things that are going to make you a better candidate that you can apply in your graduate work.
So this is kind of our first crucial thing there. Do not just restate the resume. Instead, add something to it. Add a narrative there and talk about what skills you actually gained. I think the best way to understand this is through an example. So let's look at this after example.
So 1B on the handout.
this example? What are you noticing?
A lot has been said about the implications of this work.
Awesome, yeah. So more about the big picture implications. Yeah. Why was that effective for you?
Because that can tell people how you are modifying your school life.
Awesome. So really seeing kind of the application of that knowledge. Yeah. What else? What else are you noticing? Kind of put yourself in the mind of the admissions committee.
They're saying what they gain from these experiences.
Yeah, definitely. So gain kind of in a twofold way, more of the technical stuff, but then also the sort of applicability stuff as well. Yeah. For me, this kind of indicates too that thing we were talking about, how do we know that you have the passion for this work to actually maintain it in the long run? I kind of like this thing that they gained, this real world understanding, like you said, because it kind of seems like they know the stakes and they're kind of like passionate about those stakes. So for me, that kind of speaks to I'm in this for the long haul. Anything else? Anything else that you guys like or don't like about these examples? These don't have to, you don't have to exactly use this tone as well. These are pretty blunt and direct examples because I'm trying to show you these principles, but you can make it suit your own style as well. Something else I'll give you to chew on a little bit with this creating a narrative. When you are creating a narrative with your experiences and talking about what was gained, I want to encourage you to actually, like I just said, put yourself in the mind of an admissions committee. So put yourself in the mind of that group of faculty members sitting around the table and deliberating who should actually be admitted. Maybe some people have one candidate they like and other people have another candidate. Actually think about what that discussion will be like. This will also kind of help you think about being future focused.
So many people end up being very focused on the past because that's what's easiest to write about. You already did it, that's the content really of your resume. It's what you know about. But actually, that's not the most important thing for this committee, right? As this graphic would suggest, your past is only exciting and important in how it has uniquely equipped you as a candidate in the present. And the present is really only useful as it is an indicator of the work that you are going to accomplish in the future. It's kind of economical to think like this, but think of yourself as like a potential asset to this department. They want someone who they are going to want to collaborate with and work with and even co-author on, do research with. They want someone who is actually going to be an asset to their department. So consider that. It really is important about the future, your potential for future research.
So one more example, and then we'll move on from the sort of skills gain thing. But this last example is really future focused. So take a look at this. Again, it's on your handout, 1C. pigeonholing yourself of only working with that person, but I do think it's important for them to know you have some idea of how you're going to fit into the terrain, into the environment of their department. Not just like throw me with whoever, I'll do whatever. You know, you want to have some sense of direction, kind of. Yeah. I think 9 out of 10 cases, this is a good idea, but there's that one case where maybe there's some extenuating circumstance. Definitely check with your advisor on that about name dropping, but most sources say it is a good strategy. So this is our first pitfall that we are overcoming. Instead of just restating your resume, you're focusing on what was gained from your experience.
Another question is the overall format of the paper courses.
Great.
So I was under the impression, I might be wrong here, but thinking of that the SOP would contain a list of skills that you gained, and then how the following paragraph would explain how you would use those skills to be for the resource that you were working on. So would you say that you should write the entire SOP in this format that we've just done, or you list out all the things that you've done first and then you tell them how you're going to use those skills or everything in the next two paragraphs that are going to come along?
That's a good question. We're going to talk about structure at the end here. It's one of my frequently asked questions that I'm going to show you guys a bunch of structural examples. They definitely don't have to be written in the style. I'm putting the paragraphs like this so you can see the principles at work. But I might say if you're listing all of your experiences and then going back and saying, here's how I can apply them, I might get a little overwhelmed at the beginning, right? Like if you're giving me like, I did this and this and this and this and this, and then here's how I can apply them. At the beginning, I might be like, oh my God, that's a lot of stuff. And then kind of start putting that into the narrative more later. I guess I'd have to see the exact case, but short answer, it doesn't have to be exactly like these paragraphs. Okay. But structure is important. We'll talk about that at the end for sure. Okay, here's our second pitfall, 2A. A little bit shorter, but go ahead and take a look. Now I know you don't have the whole statement of purpose, but any thoughts on 2A? Just off the top of your head.
Too broad?
Yeah, it's really broad. Yeah, definitely. Anything else? Gotcha, okay. That is very picky. Yeah, but okay, fair enough, fair enough. Yeah, generally you want to try to avoid contractions in formal writing. Anything else?
Seems like it lacks substance and vague.
Yeah, definitely. Vague, broad, for sure. This is kind of what I am thinking of as well. Generic telling. So has anyone ever heard show, don't tell? Yeah, that's kind of what I want to get to here. So number one, as you guys have rightly pointed out, this is very vague. This is very general. When I'm seeing I'm passionate, enthusiastic about human cognition, I'm working at a lab, I know methodologies and have a fundamental background, you and everyone else applying. Like, I hope you are passionate and enthusiastic about the field that you're going into. I hope you have some fundamental background in the research methodologies. So I don't think that this broad thing is necessarily grabbing me. I feel like everyone should have this stuff. But also, like, the I am passionate and enthusiastic, like, I don't know, it just has the exact opposite effect of that. You know, when you say I am passionate about this, you know, it doesn't sound very passionate. So what I want to encourage you guys to think about is showing, not telling.
Instead of saying I am passionate and enthusiastic, show me your enthusiasm and passion when you're actually talking about these things. This is really what is going to give the committee pause when they are reading the hundreds of statements, you want them to pause at yours. Instead of reading the same phrases over and over and over again, you want them to kind of stop with all of your specifics and be like, wow, that's interesting, or wow, that's a great sort of great way of thinking about it. This is a really, unique thing, or I really feel like I know what this person, I can feel their passion kind of, or feel their curiosity, or whatever trait you want to be showing. So really try to show with specifics, the specific concrete details that are unique to you, rather than just tell in broad generalities.
Let's see here. Yeah. Any questions about that before we look at an example?
If the field original research, then is it correct?
Can you say that again?
If the field original research, is it correct?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any, that I guess wasn't the part, pursuing original research. Like, it sounds like this person is an undergrad, and so the fact that they were doing their own original research is cool, I guess. What were you concerned about with it?
I was not quite convinced with this field.
Okay, you used it for like there. Yeah, I mean, I think they could frame it in a better way, kind of. So it makes it sound like the alternative would just be copying someone else's research, maybe. But yeah, I don't really have any overt objections to it. Let's take a look at an after example.
With showing rather than telling. I think some people are not going to like this example. I'll say right off the top of, right off the bat. So 2B.
Okay, what do you guys think?
Well, it's doing that thing you were saying is it's presenting the person as it's a narrative. Like, we can see where this person started and how they ended up where they are now.
Good, yeah, narrative, awesome, yeah. What else?
Maybe some like attitudes that meant to go in like,
Okay.
like just amazing looking being a good
Interesting, okay. That's interesting because I kind of liked that. Like, I felt like that was an instance where they were kind of showing their passion. Like, when I think about the brain, like, I wouldn't think of amazing because I'm like, yes, that's all right, I guess, But this person, like, is like, wow, it's awesome. So I kind of, maybe
I'm
read
glad
that.
you can read that one.
It's not actual. Yeah, what else, though?
Well, it sounds like they got into the research group because they were underrepresented minority, not because they put the effort in.
Interesting.
It comes across that way.
Okay, yeah. I think this is a really, an interesting example. There's things I really like about it and things that I think are kind of a gamble, to be honest. So what I like is I feel like they're kind of telling and showing, but they're really showing for me. So when I think about this person, I think of a person who really loves doing this stuff, and who, like, even the first sentence, I would find it difficult to name any aspect of my undergraduate life that wasn't affected by this interest. Like, that's like, yeah, they really dedicated their life to this. And then like the amazing organ, so definitely passionate. I also get the feeling like this person is very persistent, you know? They failed, and then they persisted and actually got it, and it was probably really hard for them because they were a first-generation immigrant with no previous experience. So for me, that gives them more forgiveness. But I might also say it might rub some people the wrong way. You know, maybe you just got in because you're a first-generation immigrant and this professor, you know, had this interest. I also feel like the word failed is like, maybe you don't have to say the word failed. Maybe you could say a different word, because it's just kind of like harsh, I feel like. But yeah, a gamble. Let's by show of hands, because I'm actually interested. This was actually a personal statement for, not for grad school, but I excerpted it so it can be applied, but it was for the NSF, for an NSF grant. And I was really torn on including this example, but show of hands, how many people found this example overall effective? How many people found it overall ineffective? Okay, interesting. All right, it's just good for my own edification. But this is our second point here, right? So our first point we already talk about what was gained, create that narrative, and our second point, show me with specific examples, specific concrete, not just telling me the broad generalities. Before we move on, anyone have any questions about this point? Yeah.
I just wanted to go back and check what was wrong what were the negative points in the
In the 2B? So I would say it's not necessarily negative to say. Oh, 2B. Yeah, okay, so I would say that it's not necessarily negative, but it would be a gamble. So if you're gonna take the risk of saying I failed and this professor specifically admitted me because I was an underrepresented minority, know that it might have two effects. Some people like me might be like, yeah, that's awesome. And some people, like our more critical readers, might be like, no, I don't like that. So if you're gonna take a risk and take a gamble, take it deliberately. Like, know that you're taking that risk.
Was it okay that they kind of shift the focus to the responses towards the end?
I think that's a good question. For me, it seems like this was a super important professor in their overall trajectory, so I kind of thought that was okay. I also think even though they're talking about the professor, they're kind of still talking about themselves, you know? They're like, I was happy to get guidance into the academic world, so I felt like they were using the professor as a springboard to talk about themselves as well. Yeah. All right, cool. So our third point here, again, we're going to generate it with an example. So go ahead and read 3A. Those of you who have attended the cover letter workshop will recognize something similar that I've hit on, and this does relate to cover letters as well. So basically, when I am reading, and I'm going to do a couple builds, so just take a look at the slides here. So basically, when I am reading this as an admissions committee, what I'm really reading the subtext is this. I don't know why with a baby, it just seemed like a good addition. So this is our third pitfall that we want to avoid, and unfortunately for you guys, it does mean more work. What you do not want to do is send the same exact essay to all of your schools. Now I would say this is different for med school and law school. So if you are applying to one of those, and actually those are kind of different genres in general, so if you're applying to med school or law school, again, come chat with me after. But for grad school, for just regular old grad school, you do not actually want to send the same essay to every single school. So what you want to do, our third core principle here, is tailor each essay overtly or subtly to each institution. Every single department out there is unique. every department focuses, even within your field, they focus on a specific part of the research. They, what's hot in each department varies greatly. Some people focus on this angle, other people focus on this angle. But even more than just the academics, the culture of every department is totally different, right? Just as a very superficial example, some departments prioritize teaching a lot, whereas others maybe don't prioritize teaching at all, That's an easy example, but there's a million other ways that the culture and environment of a department, they vary very greatly. What you want to do then is show that you are a perfect fit for this specific target institution. So just because you are a good fit in general doesn't mean you're a good fit for this school. What they don't want to see, and what the last example did, was like, well, you made it into Princeton's top 10 for this department, and so I figure you're fine, so I'll just try there. I've heard that you have a great reputation, so I'm just invested in this school. It just shows that you're like, yeah, well, whatever, I'll apply, see what happens. They want to know that you're a good match, a strong match, and that you're actually going to be an asset to them specifically. And you can do this in a number of ways. Perhaps the research focus that you want to do at this school is exactly what you want to work on, and you want to add this new angle to it. So that's very, very common. Or it could be that at your target institution, they don't at all have the research that you're doing, and you want to do that and bring that to their environment. So you just basically want to show that you are a good fit. So really, really tailor there. Let's see. I think I do want to note, if this is alarming to you and you're like, I don't know how to do research on these schools, not to fret. There's not really research to do. You just go and look at their website and look at how they talk about themselves, look at the type of research that they're interested in. And the CPDC, the Career Center, can also help you guys with that, so finding the actual schools that are good to apply to. But this is really, really important. And God forbid, I remember one time someone accidentally wrote the wrong school name to the school they were applying to. Like, oh God, that's the worst. So let's look at some examples, because I want to show you guys how to tailor in like an in-your-face way and how to tailor in a more subtle way. So here is 3B. This is the in-your-face way of tailoring. So what do you guys think? Okay, so you're finding it too specific. What's the potential risk of being too specific? Interesting. Okay, yeah. I was thinking that, and it is a risk as we discussed, kind of focusing so much, and maybe this person does go on to talk about someone else, I'm not really sure. What I think is really interesting with this name dropping here is in our correspondence, and this is where your networking efforts, if you hopefully have done any, and even if you haven't, you can start right now, but where those networking efforts really come into play. If you've been talking to a professor and around that deliberation table, they can say, oh yeah, I emailed with this, with her, and yeah, she seems good. That goes a long way, so keep that in mind. So that's why I like to focus on this one, because it seems like they have some sort of previously established rapport, I think, yeah.
So you say
What you don't want to do is just pick a couple people and name drop because you know you're supposed to, but you never actually read any of their stuff or don't even actually know that you're a good fit. If that's the case, then maybe you can take the more subtle approach and just like, I'm interested in the work your department does on blah, blah, blah. I would say the name dropping is best when you actually are, like you've read this person's work and you really think that you'd make a good collaboration. Because like you need an advisor, right? You need people in the department who are going to be working most closely with you. So it is a consideration. What else did you like or, yeah, go ahead.
That's the question.
Yeah.
Basically, I'm interested in doing research for the class school and learning lessons about this. How can you tailor your
So when you say you're only interested in coursework, is this a terminal master's? So what I would say then is that the master's program probably still offers a unique selection of courses or has a unique focus that you can tailor to. So for instance, the terminal master's in statistics at CMU, the MSP program, Masters of Statistical Practice, they're super unique in how much they focus on professional life skills. They're like one of the only master's program, the only statistics master's programs that focuses on real world professionalization. So in a case like that, and all different master's programs have that unique focus, you can instead of saying like research, you can instead focus to like the overall focus of the department. Does that make sense? I would take a look at their course offerings too and be like, how is this university's coursework differently focused than this university's? Or even ask yourself, why did I pick this school over this other school? You know, what was it that attracted me so much to this school? What else about this example? Like, don't like?
What happens is, like, I think this is really like professional, but very quickly I have a hunch this like that will be professional.
And then they all go on sabbatical?
Yeah. And what happens if they don't have like opening? They don't like again. What happens?
Yeah, then what happens? Probably not great. You know, what I would say, I don't think I can answer every question about how these things play out for every different field. What I have read and the research that I've done, overall it is impactful and effective if you give the names of people that you want to work with, or mention these people. I would ask your advisor about more specifics than that. You know, I would say it's highly unlikely that like 2 of the people in the department working on the same thing will both leave the same time. But yeah, maybe they don't have room. Hopefully you've maybe connected with them to get a feel on that. Or you can there's still time to do that as well.
Does it put a negative impact for the professors who may be associated with
That's a really good question. I don't know. I'm not sure. I mean, does anyone have any thoughts about that? The question was, do you think it will impact someone negatively if a professor's name isn't mentioned in the statement?
I mean, I guess it should be okay because they're not interested in it, but he probably doesn't want you to know.
That's true, yeah.
So it should be okay.
Yeah. Again, some of these I feel like are specific to fields, so this is why you have advisors and professors who've been here, who know your field, so check in with them. I think for me, this example specifically is a very explicit approach. I like that because as a person who reads a lot of documents very quickly, every day, basically all day, if something's not explicit and I'm skimming it, I'm just gonna miss it. So that's why I like this kind of in-your-face approach. You could, if this is more your style and there's nothing wrong with it, tailor a little more subtly. So this is the same example, but just without the specifics of the university, but still tailored to that university. still going to be like, oh yes, they know what they're getting into, they know the realm of our department, and they are a good fit for that, even though they're not saying it so in your face as the previous one. So these are our 3 main pitfalls here and how to avoid them. So be sure you're focusing on what was gained, focusing on the future specifically, and creating that narrative, showing with specifics, and then also tailoring each essay to the school. What I do want to do now is definitely not going to have time for a revision activity, but there are some frequently asked questions I get in a lot of my sessions and other times I've done this workshop that I want to address. And the first one is, how should I structure my statement? So we'll come back to that. I think the most common structure I see is actually the one that I like the least.
So the most common structure I see is past, present, future. Here's the work I did in the past, probably in my undergrad, or maybe even in my childhood, how I got started with this engineering or whatever. Here's the work I'm doing in the present, and then ending on, here's the work I'm doing in the future. And I will point out the personal statement can be 2 pages. I'm just making it 1 so you guys can see the structure here. So this one is my least favorite because it starts with the thing that as we've said, is the thing that's least interesting to me, right? If you're starting with, God forbid, your childhood, or you're starting with like your work you did in undergrad, which for some of you maybe some time ago, that's kind of the least exciting thing for me. So a modified structure that I like, and it seems weird, but I think it actually works really well. Reverse chronological, future, present, past. So for this, you would start off, here's the work that I want to do, here's who I am as a researcher, and by the way, I've been equipped to handle this research through my past experiences. So that for me sort of puts that structure on its face.
But there's a ton of other structures you can have that I've seen, so maybe, especially if you're doing a terminal master's, maybe with the eventual degree of going into industry, you could do something like this.
So my research goals or my coursework goals maybe, my career goals, and then my background information. There's also maybe a theme. This is maybe for people who have already done an intensive master's program and have a good idea of their research background. Maybe your research is divided into themes. Maybe you have one area that you want to pursue, another area, and then like a third area. And you could divide each of those into your past, present, future with each of those sort of themes of the research. Another thing you can do, the problem, maybe there's a big problem that has motivated your desire to go to grad school, a pressing research problem or real world problem, and then how you have an idea of how you're going to solve that problem.
But really the takeaway here is whatever structure you have, just do a deliberate structure. Make sure you can actually answer the question, how did I structure my statement of purpose? So make sure you're thinking about it. So in the back, the original question you had asked was, can I list my experiences and then talk about what I gained? You can definitely do that, just make sure you're doing that deliberately. Yeah, definitely, yeah. You can do whatever you want, there's no rules. Something I do want to mention, regardless of what format you use, so some places you apply will have text boxes that you copy and paste, but some of them you will attach a Word doc or a PDF. Keep this in mind.
This is not a joke, people. I see ones like that, and it is awful. I don't want to read them. I'm in a bad mood when I start reading them. So keep in mind when you're attaching a file, consider document design. Visual designers have a really fancy term called white space. It's just space that's white. So any space that's white on your document, you want to use white space to create a document that's inviting looking. I just want to dive on into this. It looks short, it's nicely chunked. This one looks very scary to me, and I don't want to read it, especially if I've read like a ton of other statements or other things that day. So keep that in mind.
No, justifying for me always creates weird little rivets and stuff like that, like spaces in between. Sometimes it's just crazy, so I always do left aligned. Yeah. Okay. Second frequently asked question I get. What is the difference between a statement of purpose and a personal statement? So I've done a lot of looking looking into this. I've done a lot of research out there on what people say, and the jury is still out. There is no answer everyone agrees upon. Some people say this is the same exact document, just called two different things. Some people strongly disagree with that. They say that the personal statement is a lot more personal. It's more narrative, it has more personal details, and it should be more anecdotal. What I would highly encourage you guys to do is whatever school you're applying to, most schools have tips or samples or something like that available on their website. So you can actually see what is this school looking for. Even if they don't, it never it never hurts to call the admissions department and be like, is there any, or I would actually call the department, not overall admissions. Is there any, do you offer any tips, or is there anything you would recommend, and see if you could do a little digging that way. So I'm the bearer of bad news here, but really there isn't a consensus on what is the difference between these two documents. The third frequently asked question is kind of related to that. So should I start my personal statement with some sort of anecdote or a hook? I want to show you two examples of how to start your statement of purpose.
I wrote the first one. I think it's pretty funny. I'm going to argue that both of these introductions are equally effective.
I think that it depends on your personality. What I would say is if you don't have a personal hook or anecdote, don't force it. Because that's really, and I say that because people think they need a personal hook, and that's where the stuff like, I was 5 when I realized I wanted to become like a chemist or something like that. Yeah, so if you don't have the hook, don't force it. There's nothing wrong with just diving right into the document. Space is very valuable. There's not a lot of space in this document. But if you do have kind of a cool story, or maybe that suits your personality more with a creative approach, definitely feel free to do that as well. So kind of match your personality. There's no one right answer there. Kind of goes for the whole statement. You know, I've seen statements that are more personal in terms of tone, and I've seen ones that are totally objective, held at like a distance, and I think both of those approaches work well. Kind of depends on who you are. Last FAQ here, should I account for bad things that happened? A drop in my GPA, bad test scores, any lapse in my work or educational history? Again, there's not a clear and easy answer. What I would say is don't give an excuse, especially if you don't have a good excuse. So don't need to make excuses. But if there is some sort of extenuating circumstance, maybe you spent like 6 years working as a chef in New York before you decided to go to grad school, and maybe that was a really cool experience and actually motivated your decision. I think that is actually kind of interesting. Or maybe your grades suffered because you had to work full time or take care of a sick relative. You know, these are things that you can mention if they are there. I would say though, again, similar to what we discussed in the workshop previously, it's less important what happened and more important how you learned from it, what you gained from that experience. So you can take any experience and kind of turn it to your advantage. Okay, so any remaining questions?
How long is the statement?
Most of them say 1 to 2 pages. But most of them will actually specify on the website, so I would take a look at that. Yeah, I wouldn't go longer than 2 though, unless they take more. Yes, I'll talk about the research statement after I let everyone else go. questions, definitely stick around. Other resources, I would say, the CPGC can definitely help you with this stuff. If you have to write a teaching philosophy, the Everly Center is amazing. And then this is a good book, or one of the better books that I could find. And then lastly, just briefly, the GCC offers free 50-minute long appointments. You can work one-on-one with a consultant. We can help you revise your presentations, your papers, dissertations, journal articles, what have you, and of course, CVs, resumes, and personal statements. So make those appointments on our website, and all the information is located on those flyers on the